kind of stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
Good evening, good morning, everyone. We are here with the Global Summit Voices 365. We're having a curated conversation around thriving cities. And because of the time that we're in right now, we have decided to make this webinar focus a little more on what's going on with the tragedy in the US. And I'm really grateful to be joined here by some incredible voices from around the world, from Harlem to Tokyo, via Bolivia. We've got Kevin Doyle Jones here in North Carolina, representing an amazing project in Minneapolis at the heart of the crisis. And I want to really let our guests do more of the talking today. So just, I want to really hear from all of you, like when you heard about this brutal murder and, started seeing the response in the streets. Just what was your reaction? Can you just tell us, like, what was your initial response? I'd just like to hear from each of you how you would, what you want to say about it. Being far away, whoever wants to go first.
I'll go first. It's sad. It's really saddening, and it's disappointing. And for me, I can't even say I'm mad because I've gotten beyond that point because it's been happening so much over the course of like decades, and it's not even just in the United States. Like I'm here in Brazil and the same stuff happens here, and there's no movement around it. Like, like not even a people, there are people now getting together. Like there was a protest yesterday. Not to say people don't protest here, but it's just like there hasn't been like a real civil rights movement and stuff like that here. So it's like a little bit different, but it happens here, and it's like it just really gets swept under the rug here too when it's happening all over the world, and that's what I think more and more people are feeling. And it's it's the analogy of like the bully, like, you get bullied all like for this long. At some point, the person that gets the victim is just gonna get up and just be like, look, like I'm either come back and fight, even if I beat you, or I don't, but I'm just tired of it. And, that's just like where it is. It's like, it's just tiring to see this. Like, you talk all this democracy, you talk all these type of, being free and like, being able to do things. But how are people able to live when you see this? Like, even during this pandemic, it made people really sit down because you have nothing else to do per se, like all the time as much as you normally did. So these are cycles of things that were happening like every week people's posting one or two or three different circumstances that are happening of someone getting shot, someone just getting brutalized, or someone getting their neck, getting choked out on the neck with 4 people sitting on them. Like it's just absolutely trifling. And to think that you have to go through, you say due process of law. There's this straight evidence at this point. Like there's something more behind it, and it's still kind of taking its toll of kind of like agony with it, like where people don't want to just take the accountability around it. So, that's just where, where I feel from it.
Thank you.
Can I add on to that?
Please.
So I'm also in Brazil, in Rio. And I was listening, I think, to the radio, NPR or something, when I heard, and my reaction was, it was interesting because it does happen, like René is saying, it's constant and it's story after story. But at the same time, there was something about when I heard this one, it was just like, are you kidding me? I think I screamed out loud, like, are you kidding me? Like, it was just, again? And the same phrase, I can't breathe. Like how much does this have to happen, right? How, you know, and I think everyone who cares and is involved in these sorts of issues thinks this, but I don't know. I felt like there was something, there's always, every time feels like a tipping point. There was something particularly strong about this one. Maybe because we're in the pandemic, so we're all just sort of like already at our wits' end. Everybody's sort of already experiencing such a difficult moment, and then on top of it to have, you know, another one, and you know, here in Rio, like René is saying, it's another, at another level. It's this is a curse, I think, of countries that haven't dealt with their legacy going back to slavery, and Brazil had, you know, 10 times the number of enslaved Africans as the US and 60% longer, and yet, like he says, no civil rights movement, although that doesn't mean we don't have a strong movement now. And this reminds me of Global Summit, because Global Summit happens during the Olympics. Well, 4 years ago, in July 2016, the Black Lives Matter movement came to Rio, and they met with local organizers, and they started what is called Black July together. And the local organizers in Rio have made this a massive, you know, growing effort every year. So every year in July, we have a week or more weeks of activities around, you know, Black Lives Matter related, but Brazilian specific, obviously Rio specific efforts, but also in conversation with communities around the world, where there's strong police violence against, you know, certain groups. And I just want to mention that today at our staff meeting with Catalytic Communities, our organization, we were talking about this because we had a protest yesterday, René mentioned, Black Lives Matter Brazil, in front of the governor's palace, and specifically about our local conditions. So during the pandemic, so Rio is already famous for having some of the most violent police in the world, and they disproportionately kill Black and brown Brazilians and young men. And last year, 2019, was the worst in history in terms of recorded history, in terms of police violence. And April of this year superseded last year. We had 28% more police operations during the pandemic of April, a month where everything was stopped, you know, than we did a year ago, which was already record breaking. And civilians, there was an increase by 58% of civilians killed in April of this year. So we have a government that, on top of the pandemic becoming, I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but on top of the pandemic becoming a more and more critical situation here locally in these same favela communities, the government has been coming in with police. So, you know, just it's you know, how much longer can this keep happening? It's totally unsustainable, but yet it keeps happening. You know, I don't know what else to say. It's not a very hopeful thing, but yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, you guys that was one of the things with these three global perspectives. It's like you've got the US, where there has been that civil rights movement, and it's so much more desperate in some ways. I mean, when my first introduction about Rio was hearing from my friend, documentary filmmaker Holly Mosher, and you know, she was sharing about kids in Rio getting shot by police, you know, the human rights abuses. And now you've got Bolsonaro. So I know what I can only imagine, and I will be asking you what you're up against and want to hear more, Theresa. But from where Brazil has come from with Lula and some of the gains, and I feel like that's also something, and I want to hear from Kevin. You know, you were just saying before this call about you know, when you were in high school and how this kind of brings you back, right? And so when we look at this as a global social justice movement, you know, look at what has been lost in the US, right? So, I mean, anyway, I'd like to hand it over to you, actually, if you would want to share what your response has been, what's coming up for you.
To me?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. You know, Yeah, I mean, this reminds me of 1968, which was when I graduated from high school and started college. And it's the last time in the U.S. there were violent protests in so many cities. That's the year Bobby Kennedy was killed. That was the year Martin Luther King was killed. And, you know, one of the King's speeches in that last year was that riots are the voice of the unheard, you know, and that people get angry and you know, when there's oppression, they respond and they just gotta lash out. And you know, and I'm also seeing a lot of people my age are shocked at the property damage, you know. And one other thing, there's multiple studies have just come out that when there are violent protests, or as white folks call them, riots, Republicans get elected because Democrats on the fringe become protective as opposed to wanting to be together with other people. So, you know, white folks' fear is a risk to everybody. And that's a lot of what we're working on with the Somalis, to change the stories in white folks' heads. And that's another whole issue. But, you know, it's, you know, stuff, you know, somebody was saying, you know, stuff's broken. It's like, no, it's the same stuff. It's just sort of popping up, you know, in some sense that it's not broken at all. It's happening the way it happens. But people get tired, and like suddenly everybody's tired of it. And, you know, I really think riots are the voice of the unheard. It's like, we had a demonstration here in Asheville that was peaceful, but we got out onto the highway, and they started doing tear gas and rubber bullets. And, you know, these were all like, you know, DIY hippie white folks, you know, and they were getting shot too. It was just like they had this riot uniform thing on, and so that all they needed to do was like to do what they'd seen on TV. And they didn't do it much, and then everybody backed away. But it was like when they line up with their shields and these military guns, they got to do something. You know, you got too many white guys with testosterone who just got to do something, and they've seen it on TV. And but then actually they came together, and the police and the demonstrators, when they got back into town, knelt together. They took a knee. So it was like, I don't know. When they're out away from people, they shot them. But when they came back into town, they got back together. It's like they were something bigger than themselves. They were playing out some play that was bigger than themselves. Once you go out onto the freeway bridge, they had to play the scene they'd seen on TV. So it's a confusing time. I've seen it before, and it's still a confusing time.
Yeah, like they got into some kind of cop and, you know, like cowboy Indian role play, or
it was a crazy role playing, and you know, you got young boys with guns, you know, and they've seen cops with guns who were dressed like they are on TV, so they had to do it, you know. And then they felt bad, and they all took knees, and they took off that shit. It was like, wow, when they have these shields in the front of their face, they were one way. When they weren't, they were this other way.
Wow, just like that. I just want to bring in Standing Rock because that was the closest thing I've seen to anything like this. And I got there right after. So just, and I'm going to do a little round of introductions to let our audience and participants out there know who we're talking to. These are all incredible leaders.
Can I add something
Yes,
to this
please.
topic?
Yeah.
I think not only in America is happening this tragedy, as it's happening in many countries in the world. So I think the police institution has too much power, and it has to rebuild the justice system and rebuild the police institution. And also I think really we have to have a dialogue between the community, between institutions, between politicians, because not for very few people everything will be a disaster, the police who do these things are really few people, and the polices involved in the institution are diverse, not only white. There is also black polices, right? So I think we really need to change the system. We have to create new system, not only in America, everywhere.
Can I just add something real quick with that? What you said? Yeah, I mean, I agree. And then you have to look at this as a chessboard. You know, the police are the pawns. Like, that's the reality. The police are given order. And when you're looking at this stuff happening everywhere, even in the United States, like, obviously there's orders being put out there to each of these police people in all these states to do this, because it's not like, okay, it just happens in New York, happens in California, you know, it happens in Atlanta, it happened, like, so, and they're all different sections. So this stuff is just spread and tactics. So we have to get to, like, beyond the pawns. Who are the rooks? Who are the, you know, the kings and the queens that are controlling this board, you know, because
exactly, who controls
that's what's
them?
coming.
Nobody
That's what's,
controls them.
yeah, and
They
you know,
cannot
with
control each other, right?
yeah, and you get to this place where, you know, even with police, I mean, I have family members that are police. I have good friends that are in law enforcement, from, I mean, ranging from normal police to, you know, state troopers to, you know, federal agents. And when you hear the dialogue, you know, that just holds on, it's like, it's, you know, it's saddening to see where this is. And, you know, sometimes, you know, some of my friends are like, well, the best thing to do is have more people, like, of color join these forces. You know, like, I've had friends who are even in the military that have said to me that fighting, like, going over to, like, another country and fighting another country where people in the same military, the American military, have had to be more scared of white people in the military shooting them overseas than actually the people that you're going against in war. So, you know, there's a lot, to your point, you know, there's a lot to be said. There's a lot of policy changes. There's a lot that has to be revised with this, you know?
Yeah.
Thank you, Renee. And Noemi, did you feel complete? I wanted to make sure we got your response, like your feeling when you heard about this, like what came up for you. And then I want to ask Yuki how you're seeing this from Japan.
Yeah, I finished. I basically think same as everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, gracias. Okay, Yuki, how are you?
Yeah, this is I still like the reaction of the COVID-19. It's like, are you kidding? It's like we still, like, in the dream. Nobody imagined that kind of situations. But my reaction about COVID-19 is really like this pandemic move us forward for the, like, next decade and stuff like that. So I accept this situation in a really positive way. Especially I'm in the startup industry. My company is a tech company. That's why we have a lot of things to do to change this old system. And this pandemic obviously reveal we still how old system we still using it. Yeah,
exactly.
We can change a lot of things. Also, like, it's a time to think about from the outside the box. So this is kind of the first time we can discuss the same topic all about the country, because we gathering here from all around the world. We talking about the same topic. So it's really like, it's a kind of amazing things, right?
Technology changed the life of the people.
Right. Yeah. So this is a chance to connect it to each other all around the world. So I'm just hoping we can be like one team, one world, and bear this COVID-19. Yeah, this is my reactions. You know, we should talk about like how we can deal with this situation in the positive way.
Solutions. we're going to get into solutions because we have very solutionary people here. And yeah, thanks for just getting into all that. I want to go more in depth on a few things. But first, for everyone here, just so you know who these incredible people are. So René John-Sandy, I'm so happy to have met just this last week, an incredible artist in action that was actually on a planning call for our Artists in Action Unite concert planning for the Global Summit Impact Week this August. And René is the co-founder CEO of Hip Hop Loves Foundation and a pretty amazing longtime entertainment executive, and just doing amazing work in Rio, working with youth, motivating them, produces a radio show. I'm going to hear from you next, but I just wanted to presence you and presence your amazing global work. Originally from Harlem, been in Rio de Janeiro for the last year and a few months. Welcome. Kevin Doyle Jones, longtime hero. Some of you here listening might know about Kevin from SoCap, from Social Capital Markets in San Francisco. I think probably the most successful, biggest impact investment conference in the United States, and a serial entrepreneur, but also doing really groundbreaking work in community finance, also working with his wife and faith finance, and bridging the religious or Christian movement and getting the values of Christianity into investment, and is going to be talking with us about some amazing housing financial innovations with Somali communities. And thank you so much for being part of this, Kevin, and all of your great work. And Yuki, you heard a little bit about what he's up to with technology. Yuki is here in Tokyo, and a new friend and partner of the Global Summit with his company Now Room, and has a share house and is a global citizen. So we're going to be hearing more from you. Thanks for being here, Yuki. And Noemi Inoue, am I saying your name right?
Yes,
is
Inoue.
I read the only foreign elected councilwoman in Tokyo, maybe Japan. Is that right? I mean, even now, like in 2020, like that's kind of amazing. And it says a lot about Japan, but it also says a lot about you and your courage. And, not only have you gone and, gotten this amazing position and doing the leadership that you do in Sarita, but also your work leading a multicultural organization. And I understand you are the head of the Latin America House for the Olympics, and really working to bring cultural diversity to Tokyo and build bridges with Latin America and Japan. So it's really amazing to have your perspective here, coming from Latin America and bridging with your neighbors here in Brazil that are represented.
Yeah.
And Theresa Williamson was our co-chair of Thriving Cities at the Global Summit Leaders Forum in Rio de Janeiro, the last Olympic edition, and really made that so meaningful by bringing in the incredible local leaders who were really standing up to the Olympic regentrification. And Theresa's work with catalytic communities, it's really at the intersection of political science, social justice, urban planning. Theresa, it's so great to have you back in this conversation here, and really looking forward to your insights and on media and what you're facing, and the extreme that Rio is, that you've been seeing and standing up to change over the decades of your work. So thanks so much for being here. And now to get a little deeper into your stories and this conversation. So René, I can't even imagine what it must be like. I've been kind of told, like, by some African-American friends in the US are seen as like, you know, just kind of how unimaginable it is. Like, to actually, you know, I wouldn't normally call out race, but actually, yeah, this is a time where it's like, you as an African-American man, you know, like, how does that feel, like, with what's going on? I mean, yes, this is the height. It's like, enough is enough, as Theresa was saying. Yeah, just let's talk about race. And I want to hear.
I mean, again, like, I feel like it, you know, it saddens me. You know, I've been through a lot of the phases of this, like, even growing up in Harlem. Like, I've seen police shoot people, innocent people, for no reason. I've seen cops brutalize people in my neighborhood, and, you know, like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and people throwing bottles at the cops just to get them off the people for, you know, just trying to brutalize them. You know, I've been a victim of, you know, police just, you know, racial profiling. Like, you know, even going into my own house, cops asking me, what do I live here? You know, just stuff like where you don't, you know, it's like a mental thing that makes you feel like you don't belong. You know, it's trying to make you, like, in a mental phase feel like that, you know, and make you feel like inferior, or like where people are, like, even walking around your neighborhood, like, you know, you're walking around people who you should look at them and be like, oh, I should feel safe walking around, but actually you feel more fear walking around because you don't know what that next move is going to be. So, you know, and seeing that not just here, I mean, in New York, but seeing that in Rio, hearing from stories of people here in Rio with it. I mean, being in Russia, hearing the people, that's not even Black people talking about, that's just people of Russia. If, you know, if you want to say, like, color of skin, these are people in Russia that talk about this, you know, and, you know, it's this oppression that is, like, it's just at its boiling point, you know, and, you know, to be quite honest, when this last election occurred, I was like, this is going to happen. I said, it's just about to happen. And I think because even through the Obama administration, and there's no disrespect to Barack Obama, but this stuff was happening all throughout then too. You know, we even started a project based on that, because Trayvon Martin's, all these other people who died were happening during this course of the time. I think people also got comfortable with the situation of seeing, you know, just being honest. Like, I think a lot of people got comfortable because you saw a Black man in the office, but there was still the same things that are happening. Now things are just kind of just won't work. Then you have a person in this office now that people despise, you know, for whatever the reasons they choose to despise, you know, but it's not like these problems did not exist before Donald Trump was in office. Like, these things existed for a long time. It's just now, rather than just being covert about it, it's just operating as it's being overt. And, you know, it's just gotten to this point. So you know, I think it's cool to see a lot of people, like, all over the world now just standing up and be like, yo, enough is enough with this. Like, you know, all over. Like, really people standing up to, like, this needs a change. Like, and part of the thing is, it's not white against Black. It's people against injustice and racism. That's what it's about. Because even with media, you're not seeing, like, photos of, like, these conversations. You're not seeing a whole bunch of pictures where the protesters around, where there are white, Black, Latino, Asian people really, like, getting down praying or you know, having a word or hugging each other. You don't see that in the media. You're not seeing those photos. Only if you're, you know, now with social media, you're able to see these things. But what you're seeing is the looting, the cops fighting each other, fighting the protesters, you know, the people coming out of stores, breaking stuff. Like, that's most of the stuff that you're seeing. And so there's that other side of it, which, I feel, the powers that be at this point, they don't want to see people uniting. They want to keep people separated. And right now, you're seeing more and more people getting together. So it's scary for the people that are trying to hold this down. And, you know, and that's, I think, this has always been the case. People don't want to see unite. And through fear, through greed, through all this stuff, like, people can have as much money as you want. in this world. There's abundance in this world, like even people uniting, you know, like you don't have to be separated to do that, you know, so it's about money and all this stuff, power. You can have all this stuff, like let people live. Like the people who are being oppressed also are not going to come and retaliate. They just want to be free. They just want to live a life without, you know, being part of my life, being fucked with at this point, you know? So.
If I can add something.
Yeah.
I worked 20 years in Mississippi. My family's from there. And I did a 20-year retrospective as a reporter on the Freedom Summer of 1963 and talked to Robert Moses, who really was sort of the architect of Freedom Summer. He's been teaching young black men math for the last 15 years or so and stopped doing it. But what he did then was black men were being killed when they were trying to register to vote, and nothing was happening because in Mississippi, you know, a black death did not count. And so in doing Freedom Summer, he said one of the goals was to bring down some white college educated folks whose parents were in the MSA and who got their TV news from the Manhattan news stations, so that those deaths would happen and that something would happen. And, you know, I think in some of the police things yesterday and the last couple of days, they've been not just targeting the people who usually get targeted. There's scenes in Minneapolis where I'm working where they're walking down a relatively affluent white suburb and they're saying, light them up, and they're shooting up, you know, white folks on porches. So, you know, when the folks who have power are disenfranchised by militarized police, more things happen. That's what Robert Moses realizes, that, you know, what he needed was some folks whose parents, you know, knew the TV anchors in New York. And that's what caused, you know, that's what caused the killing of Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner, you know, in Philadelphia, Mississippi, that really changed and brought in the National Guard, brought in the federal folks, because the killing of the African Americans who were trying to register to vote didn't cause any change. So it could be that they, you know, the militarized police have gone far enough that people have seen their violence. I think that's, if I had a positive takeaway, is that they're shooting up neighborhoods where people haven't seen police brutality before. And so that could cause some solidarity around what the hell is happening with police. People who think of themselves as, you know, the people who get their calls answered when they call us at the city hall are angry. So that, I don't know, as I'm looking for things. One other thing I'm seeing happening is that with COVID, there's been a lot of mutual aid societies, you know, ad hoc groups that are giving old people their food, carrying them to the bringing the food to the old people, you know, diapers to single moms and stuff like that. A lot of those things have become ad hoc neighborhood watch things, especially I've seen in the Somali community, especially, and they're wanting to say, you know, we're not part of this, we are here. And so, you know, the police haven't stood up for the people, but neighborhoods are standing up for people. So I think as formal civil society breaks down, you know, the mutual aid societies that arose during COVID are stepping up in a lot of American cities today. So I mean, that resilience has been there for, you know, since March, and now they're doing something more. So those are two
amazing things. Thank you so much for bringing that in. It brought up a couple of things. So my mom happens to be in Minneapolis, is from there and is there now. And, you know, it's been surfaced a lot. Actually, Ted Schulman, who's on our team, he was a first day occupier, and he actually represented Occupy Wall Street at the UN Earth Summit and co-authored the open source imperative. But in his experience, he was the first one to mention this in the George Floyd, you know, crisis that's going on, that, you know, a lot of the violence that's happening, and particularly in Minneapolis, 80% of the arrests are actually from out of town. And
Wow.
and I'm hearing you, Kevin, that yes, this is a political strategic response, and maybe that is needed, but then it's the backlash from that is like the increase of totalitarian regimes, you know, more populism, you know, the very thing that we're kind of, that's the knife, right? That's what our global conversation is about. Like, can we, you know, create enough security with our fellow human beings that we will actually empower ourselves to say, we're going to create the security together. We can make a system where there's enough for everyone to live in peace and harmony. We're going to come out of the pandemic with, you know, really taking care of everyone and making well-being the new, you know, future, not this oppression. So, I mean, I feel like that's the undercurrent, but just to get back to, you know, the point about who's doing the looting, it's not necessarily the people who should be enraged, right? But it is this tactical and kind of taking advantage of the situation to have that voting. Yeah, I mean, if you want to say more about that, and then
yeah, if you look,
oops,
if you look at the Bellingcat site, they've done a lot of research on these white supremacist groups that want a civil war. There's the Boogaloo Boys. There's two or three that have showed up and have broken a lot of things and then left town. But there's really strategic white supremacists who are wanting to, you know, especially do property damage, because that's what makes white folks feel scared is property damage. And so they come in and they do a lot of property damage, and then people kind of get blamed, and then they're gone. But the Bellingcat site is a really good site to look at all. But there's like 3 different groups that are moving around the country trying to make things worse. White supremacist groups, and you know, if you look, apparently you can find it out on the whole 4chan subgroups and Reddit groups with a lot of 4chan stuff. But they're angry white males with guns, you know.
Right. Okay. Does anyone feel called to add to that? I feel like there's a lot coming up right now, so we can.
Yeah, I think the important point here is how society is divided. You know, the gap between rich and poor is very big. So we have to, as people, we have to understand that, and we have to try to reduce that gap, because everybody has a right to have good job, good income, good savings, good education. And this is not happening, right? And it's too much related to the race as well in many countries, as in Bolivia or in America. For example, in Bolivia, the native people are in more disadvantage than the mixed or white people, and they are the majority. So I think the most important thing is to find a balance in the economy and distribute the national income equitative to all the sectors.
Yep. I think because of the coronavirus, everything we can get online for free. We can get the good education from the online for free. So before, we have to be rich to get the great educations, but not at all anymore. If we could connect it, the YouTube, any like this kind of like event, we can join the free. We can get a lot of the perspective via the internet. So if we could provide everyone the free internet, so the people the children can learn naturally. So this is like a new chance to be like become the equal. Yeah, we try to make a balance before, but what we need to do is give them the free internet. So that's a big solutions as a government or as a country, as well as society. We give the internet and some device to connect to the world. So which means we can keep the social distance, and we keep the distance. We can learn, and then we should pay for the feedback. So to get education, we don't have to pay anymore. So more importantly, to get the feedback. This is important. There is a value things to pay for it. So yeah, this is my opinion, to make a balance or to change the society a little bit.
I'm completely agree with you. I think, as we talked before, the internet have changed the society long time ago, and after the corona, it will change more, because really we need to keep social distance in events like corona. But the point is, we also have to invest in software from now on. And I don't know how many countries can do that. Because, for example, in Bolivia, we have a 60% of the population who are not immersed in the nation, and they are analphabet. Even if they have access to internet or the computer system, they are not able to read. You know, that's the issue. The anecdotic is, in Bolivia, we have a Aymara civilization who didn't have a writing system, but the language is neutral, that through that language you can make software to translate from Latin language to any Latin language, through Aymara language to another language, right? But they didn't have a writing system. So, but I think I'm completely agree with you. Investing in internet will be the next step. And for example, in Sumida, where I am counselor, we are very delayed, even if we are in Japan, even if Japan is the most advanced country in technology.
Not really anymore.
We didn't have a Zoom meetings in the assembly. We are going physically. We still going physically to the meetings because we must go, right? And also there is no internet education for the school, for Shogako, Chugako, for the primary or intermediate school. There is no possibility to have lessons through internet, even if we are in Japan. So from now, I think many things will change and the internet will gain a lot of power anyway.
Yeah.
Can I just?
Yeah, you go first.
Yeah. Well, I want to say quite a bit, because there are a lot of bits that I felt like dialogue with what's happened in Brazil over a couple of decades that I've been working in favelas, but also just Brazil is such a different reality right now to so many other countries. We are living such a different reality. So I'll go there in a second, because that's a real downer. But first, I just wanted to say it's been really interesting to watch the importance of the internet, the role it's played, along with productive social policies. So in the early 2000s in Brazil, like literally in the late 1990s, Brazil was the worst or second or third worst income inequality country in the world. So Brazil used to compete with a couple of African countries for ranking of most unequal in the world for years. And through a number of social policies, we started reversing that, including basic income transfers for the lowest, poorest members of society through families, kids that were enrolled in school, their mothers would get these income transfers. Affirmative action to give access to guarantee university spots for historically, people who were historically left out of the system, Afro-Brazilians and low-income Brazilians, and other policies as well. And we have the largest public health care system in the world was created at the time here in Brazil. Interesting. So that all helped feed into a moment where Brazil was taken off the world hunger map. So you no longer had people dying of starvation. And people started accessing university, you know, Black Brazilians started accessing university, you started getting shifts in policy, some people started making it into public office from favelas or from Black, you know, Afro-Brazilians, et cetera. And then as that was all happening, you had this in late 2000s, early around 2010, 11, 12, that period, you had, you know, just social media take off worldwide, but Brazil has always been a hyper-social culture and has always been an early adopter and a happy adopter of useful technology. And so you didn't get barriers to that, and people just started using the internet and using it very effectively, very creatively. And you saw this huge growth of community-based media outlets and producing their own narratives, especially in favela communities, which are the neighborhoods that I work in. Literally hundreds of these community-based media outlets changing the way their communities are perceived and bringing visibility to all these issues we're talking about here today, like police violence and race, but, you know, low quality public infrastructure, neglect, et cetera, that have been around for generations. And now, thanks to the internet, people were using it to get their narratives out, to get their stories out, so that the only narrative, Brazil's pretty low ranking on media freedom. And so you had this dominant perception of these communities that was just reproduced, and they would see themselves often through those same lenses, and it just kept reproducing the same over so long. And then all of a sudden we had these opportunities, and people were producing their own narrative and becoming aware of the qualities that their communities had that were always stigmatized from the outside, but also the challenges they faced, and realizing those challenges weren't necessarily self-imposed. On the contrary, there was sort of a systematic maintenance of precarity by the government over generations to keep a servant class in place, basically. And that's really what Brazil, you know, you can sort of summarize, especially Rio. Rio has a particularly bad history in this sense. Rio was the largest slave port in world history. And, you know, just the city of Rio received 5 times the number of Africans as the entire United States, okay, in terms of arrived here. And yet people don't know, even people in Rio don't know. And so anyway, I just wanted to provide that context to where we are now, where I mentioned the police violence arising during the pandemic. But on top of that, Brazil is now the second most cases of COVID in the world, the 4th in total deaths. That's quickly increasing. Those are the official figures, which are way undercounted. So actually, we're probably much higher than that. And then Rio is where it's growing fastest. São Paulo is 3 times larger in terms of population than Rio, but it only has about double the number of cases, and their death rate is lower. And here in Rio, where are most of the cases? They're in favelas. They're in these favela communities, except we don't have the numbers. The government, so the mayor last week actually took down the city's dashboard for 4 days. They recalculated and they put it back up with over 1,000 fewer deaths, saying that, oh, they're not counting comorbidity. So if you have a heart condition and you die of COVID, then you had died of a heart condition, unless it's on your death certificate. And many people aren't, because often the tests come back after the death certificates are issued and so on. So we have authorities here that are basically using the pandemic as an opportunity to cleanse historic minorities that they don't want to deal with, and they never wanted to deal with. And now to bring in what you mentioned, Kevin, with the mutual aid societies. So here in Rio, the favelas are incredibly organized, and their response to all of these, you know, to the government neglecting during this pandemic has been incredible. So you have a community, Villa Kennedy, that's known for violence, but 100 different community groups or community volunteers from different groups got together to create a crisis cabinet at a community center where they're just receiving all of these supplies and they're distributing them, they're getting information out. You've got the mobilization front in another favela called Maré, where residents have all, or where they're doing public information and drives for hygiene products and so on. Anyway, these are 2 projects. There's hundreds of community-based groups that are all responding, and they're the ones doing the relief efforts. And then on top of that, and just to finalize, 8 of the police operations that have happened in the last couple of months happen in the middle of these food distribution campaigns by local groups. They were literally seeing the state interfere, the state not only neglect and look the other way, and public officials encouraging people to go out and ignore the quarantine if they're workers. And then on the other hand, we're seeing those same authorities send in the police on top of when the community is responding to try to address the pandemic. So it's such a crazy context compared to what I think most people are dealing with. And I think the whole world needs to know about it, because I think one of the only things that might eventually do something about it is international community saying, Brazil this can't happen. What's happening in Brazil should not be permitted. Nobody should be doing business with Brazil right now. So anyway, I just thought that it was important to provide that context here, because I think it dialogues with a bunch of things that were brought up around the internet and, you know, media and how to maybe work with media and other things. But also it's sort of a warning of what can happen if you let historic injustice and inequality just keep on and become so much a fabric of society at such a deep level. And I know there are other countries who have similar historic injustices that go back further, in fact.
Well, thank you so much for providing that extraordinary contrast to, well, on one hand, you hear a lot in the US right now that they're amplifying the COVID deaths for profit, right? And you're describing an opposite situation. And, you know, what sounds like, yeah, a strategic, let them die. Great. You know, I mean, it's quite similar to, let's take advantage of this to go out. I mean, I think it was Vice just came out with a report. I think we've, you know, if we haven't, we'll post it into the event. But, you know, it's literally describing like actual lines that Kevin, you're you know, on Reddit, there's actually communications that are being monitored to use this as an opportunity to kill people. So those are extraordinary things. But Theresa, you've mentioned the opportunity for global citizens to come together. And you're also naming things that have worked in the past. And, you know, it's like, what is stopping us as like literate, you know, and Noemi, thank you for mentioning the illiteracy, and also that we can use technology to bring voices, you know, there's no reason not to have voices heard. It's like we have different types of literacy, right? And now we can use technology to be more inclusive. But Theresa, you know, you named what kinds of amazing gains were made with what we call in development economics, the Gini coefficient. And it's one of the opportunities that I saw in this conversation, you know, to kind of look at like what happens when there is that wealth disparity, that you are going to have that violence. And it's like, we as a global human society, can we just take the veil off, get out of our little tribal attitude and see like, you know what, there's a way that we're going to have peace, and it's by reducing inequality. It's really clear. And there are ways, there are policies that have been proven to work. And there are strategies of how we as a global community can, I mean, look what we did with apartheid in South Africa. And we actually have some participants on the chat right now from South Africa. Right, Kevin? I think you were kind of monitoring that. You were
right.
Some of the questions. You know, and sometimes I hear people talk about, let's tear down, let's have everything collapse. You know, there's this idea that we just need everything to crumble in order to rebuild it. And I just want to say, from my experience in Zimbabwe, particularly, where things have collapsed so badly, and when you have I want to name like what's at stake right now. And when things get to the point where people are in such a survival mode, it makes it really hard to organize. And, you know, thank you so much, René, for naming, you know, kind of the other side of the sword when you have somebody that sounds great and who's on our side, like Obama. People went to sleep. When the global summit started, people were amped up because we'd had 8 years of Bush, right? It was like, okay, we are gonna, you know, let's create a new system. It's time for a whole system redesign. That was the mantra. And now we have that again, right? But then you get some nice guy and yeah, people went to sleep. So people are saying 2020 is perfect vision. And, this year, could this be the time where we look at things clearly and have the ability to learn from our past in order to create solutions? So I know I didn't want to talk too much because I know you all have so much to say, but I just wanted to reflect some of the points that you kind of ended.
Could I talk about what we're doing in Minneapolis? It's
Please.
Related to
Solutions.
mutual aid societies. And solutions. I'm sure, I don't know if you all know what saving circles are. They're how immigrant folks save. It's 10 women and they might do $100 a week, but everybody has to put up the $100, and in 10 weeks you get $1,000. So it's a mutual saving circle, right? So we working with Somali refugees. They like to be called refugees because they have a legal status in Minneapolis. There's more of them there than anywhere else. They came there for meatpacking. They don't buy houses because they're observant Muslims, and so they don't want interest. So my partner, Saeed Sheikh Abdi, who would be here, but it's 3 a.m. in Nairobi where he is right now. And he said, I'm not really going to do this. So I'm speaking about him. So he came up with this great idea of doing saving circles, but for houses. And so we've got a hybrid cooperative, and it takes 100 people. Each one puts up $2,500. We buy a house for $250,000, and then you get paid back by your neighbor who's paying your house payment over 15 years. That's essentially what happens. So there's no interest, and we're keeping the money local. And then two things happen. We're selling the mortgage to a local co-op lender. So we get a note. And so when we raise the $250,000, we give it to the co-op lender, and they take 50, we get $200,000. And then we're starting to build houses. So we make more profit. So the co-op makes more money, because observant Muslims don't have many good places to save for their retirement. So we're creating a kind of a little development bank by reselling the mortgages. We're also going to do revenue share financing for Muslim businesses that don't get growth capital, because again, they don't want loans. The other thing we're going to do that we did in Mississippi that we're going to bring there to replicate is that we're going to take a Muslim prospective homeowner into what I call white trust circles. And we did this in Jackson, Mississippi. We created the largest per capita habitat house, because we would go to a civic club or a Sunday school or a synagogue or a law firm partnership and say, look, this is not a handout to the needy, this is bootstrapping. They're putting in 500 hours. And we would come away with enough money to build a house. With the co-op, and they can have non-voting stocks so they don't overcome anything, they can also get paid back. And so they can get what you would get from a nonprofit, where you'd say, look, here is a young adolescent girl who's got a desk in a house, as opposed to 5 kids around a coffee table. And this is how much better, but also you get a small check because you get part of their house payment. They're paying you. So you get proof that it works. And the point of that, and what happened in Jackson, is that the stories that white folks had in their heads of these people in these neighborhoods changed, because they saw, one, that the houses were really built. And here they will see that the people are in houses, that their lives are better, and they'll get a check. Because I think one of the things that's most dangerous to people of color is the stories that white folks have in their heads when they don't have a relationship with them. So we'll have relationships of reciprocity, not philanthropy. And you get a small check. You make 3.5% a year, not a lot, but you'll make some money, and you prove the idea works. And so our idea is to replicate that. We have an imam we work with who's built mosques in 30 cities for Somali Americans. And he said, I can get you the first two. It's like a priest at a mosque. It's like a priest in a church, but it's an imam at a mosque, or a rabbi at a temple. It's a clergy person. It's a Muslim clergy person. And so anyway, he says he can get us the first 200 people in each of the 200 cities. So we've been putting this thing together, and there's some legal things, but we think it's a really simple, replicable thing where, the wealth from houses can be building businesses and other houses in communities and not go up into being financial instruments. But then white allies can join, and they can get a different story. And the good thing about doing it in these white trust circles, in the Rotary clubs, the civic clubs, the Sunday school classes, the synagogues, is that this is where the white folks gather once this Somali immigrants leave, and then they'll be telling a new story among themselves. And so that's part of what we did in Jackson that helped it become a Black majority city in a safe way, which Jackson was not known for being safe for Black folks before that. So anyway, that's the thing we're doing that I think has a lot of potential.
There's a lot of potential, and I just brought it back to the, this view, because I wanted to just check in on like what made that work. And I mean, it's not coincidental, I think, that this came from a Somali refugee community. So I wanted to ask what made it work culturally?
Well, what made it work is that it's totally new and innovative, but it felt really normal. It was just one tweak further from saving circles that they'd already been doing, saying we can do saving circles collectively at higher dollar with allies' money around them. So like one Somali guy who runs a really nice translation business in all the medical centers. He's got people who translate from Urdu to English, and he's got people to translate from Portuguese to English. He said, look, this is totally new and innovative, but I could explain it to my grandmother who died in 1960 in 30 seconds. It's like, Grandma, it's saving circles done big for houses, and, the white folks can put in their money, but they don't control it. That's another whole, we have a special kind of non-voting share for allies so that philanthropists or white investors don't get to run it. So making sure that the do-gooders don't get in the way, and then helping folks do what they're already doing, just a little bit, something added to it.
Giving them
space. It's a real old solution. Yeah, it's a real old solution done in a new way.
I love that. Yeah, we're saying ancient futures, right? Like there's so much. I mean, we're at the tip of like a million years of culture, and history isn't 5,000 years old. It's like 500,000 years old, and you talk to Somalis about this with Saeed and I, and he says, would you invest in your neighbors? I said, of course, we already are. I mean, and you talk to people in my neighborhood and you say, let's invest in our mortgages together. And they say, get off my lawn, I'll stand my ground. Private property white folks would not do this. Immigrants already are investing in each other. These saving circles are informal, but they're huge. There's $140 million that goes from Minneapolis, Twin Cities to Somalia every year from these saving circles, far bigger than international aid. It's just it's informal, and it's huge.
I can imagine. It happened also in Japan. We have a lot of Latin American people working, and of course Bolivian working in Japan, and the money they send to Bolivia is really very important for the economy of Bolivia, even if they are the worst pay in Japan, right? Because they are like labor force, but for Bolivia is very good income. And I think Japan really nowadays needs the support of foreigners in the economy, especially in areas that the Japanese people cannot work. The rate of natality is going down. The rate of longevity is going up. So now Japan really needs to be open and to receive immigrants from different countries, but they also need to have good migration law, because they don't have, right? Now many foreigners from Asia mainly are coming to work in certain areas, but they don't have the best conditions. They don't have
Yeah, so
the
that kind of sorry, like that kind of situations I can see
mm,
a lot in Japan. I've been traveling a lot, and after coming back to Japan, I obviously see a big problem about that. So some of my friends came to Japan, but they couldn't rent a house just because of they don't get the trustability from the like
exactly,
hospitality.
exactly.
So that's why I did some like contract as a emergency contact for my friends, foreign friends, and but what the trustability is. So I really changed that kind of system. That's why I created a new service called Now Room. This is you can rent a house without any paper document, any like contract on the paperwork. So everything everything gets settled on the online, and so we can keep a distance, social distance. Also, we can get and like a trustability from the only credit card. So that's our new solutions. Then I try to provide this service for the foreign people who live in Japan right now.
Oh,
So
that's very
yeah,
wonderful. Yeah,
and
because still we have somebody, if you are foreigner and you want to rent a house in Japan, you need the guarantee of some Japanese
yeah.
people. But the contract will be with the direct with the owner of the house or through the agency, how it will be the contract through internet.
Sorry.
So
Melanie, I've got to go in just a second. So if you need
how will
anything
be the
more.
contract between the foreigners and the owner of the house? It will be direct through internet.
Yeah. So we will be a platform. So
Mm.
we have our own insurance for everyone. So you don't have to care about like anything. You can just using the app, and then you can rent a house. That's our solution. Then
Oh, that's wonderful. You
I
should
love it.
you should
I can
tell me.
testify
I'm
as a
going to
foreigner.
promote in the
It's
foreign
very,
community.
thank you for mobilizing, the kind of embracing foreigners in your work. And I think the kind of solutions that Kevin, that you're sharing, I mean, these are testimonies to how refugees can be such an asset, and they're especially needed here in Japan. So I hope that this video and the Somali refugee solution can actually be shared more here. Kevin, I understand you have to go, so we're actually going to be moving into kind of our final round, touching a little more on citizen media, but also like hearing more about what each of you are doing to bring more equality and awareness and understanding, and then moving into the whole system redesign, which is our bigger mission, and this is a big stepping stone in building our community. Kevin, would you give us a few words of like what would your call to action be, or how do we really move this forward?
Yeah. I'd be glad to talk to folks about replicating our model. It has some costs. You have to create a state security, in each state. So it costs you about $30,000 to set up the legal thing of this kind of cooperative. But the thing is, I mean, what's neat about it is that refugees are already doing it. We're working first with observant Muslims because we're working. Our first customers will be folks who can buy a house, so they can pay a larger down payment to make the business viable for us to work with folks who can't do that big a down payment, because we're working with folks who could buy a house but won't, because they don't want to be tainted by interest. So that's our first market, if you will. But in Minneapolis, there's lots of Hmong. There's lots of Ecuadorians. There's lots of Mexicans. We're going to be working with a lot of other folks, but to make the business viable, we're this untapped market of people with more money to buy houses, but they have really good jobs, but they don't want to be you know, the American financial system doesn't work for observant Muslims. But it turns out that interest is a really bad thing. You know, interest gives an edge to people who already have money compared to people with labor or ideas. I never thought about it until I started working with Muslims.
Exactly.
And it's like, oh my God, you know, I used to think interest was this, you know, money makes money on money. Yeah, well, that works if you have money. If you don't have money, then a non-interest thing puts everybody on the same level. It's like Muslim finance is so much more fair and is much less financialized, is much less, you know, the bankers don't rule, the bankers are subservient. And you can have revenue sharing loans, but you don't get compound interest defrauding you and that stays high while the economy goes low. There's a ton of things that I really love about Muslim finance now that I stumbled into it because, you know, Saeed, we had to solve this problem together. We were working together.
Well,
but
yeah, and we call it Muslim, but it's also like, where did that come from? I mean, it's like, it's Muslim, but it came from something. And maybe somebody sometime knew that when you have compounding interest, you create these inequalities and you have this happen. What's going on with George Floyd?
Yeah, you know, it's Abrahamic law. Christians had it, Jews had it, Muslims had it, and the Muslims remembered it. Christians forgot, Jews forgot, Muslim kept it, and it's so, you know, it was because it's, you know, giving an unfair edge to money and making money make money makes everybody else a commodity. So, you know, I want to build something that, you know, long term, I want to build something where interest is just passes away. So that's what I have to say. Unfortunately, it's late my time and I have family requirements. So thank you all. I'd be glad to connect with anybody through Melanie. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin. Great contribution as always.
Thank you.
All right. And hey, so we're like almost an hour and 15 in.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, it's like
so fast. And
totally.
I didn't say anything.
You're amazing. Yeah, I mean, a couple of points, you know, just Theresa, you've mentioned citizen journalism, but I think if we're going for more of the systemic solutions, I know that's something that you've been doing. You haven't mentioned Rio on Watch, but I'm always seeing, you know, you're posting these local stories that are translated and really bringing these local voices out. Mark Tybalt, who's on our board, he's working with Brazilian indigenous media network leader. I'm not remembering her name right now, but it's like, yeah, this is a solution that we could, you know, bridge these voices and kind of create this new media and promote that. I just wanted to kind of go around and hear like what each of you are up to. René, I wanted to ask you what, I know, Theresa, you asked René what you're doing in Rio, but I wanted to presence your work a little bit because it just seems so on point with the kind of solutions that we need right now everywhere.
I mean, basically my organization, we educate and empower youth globally. We created workshops based off the pillars of hip hop, sports, and arts, and we use technology as a platform to connect youth globally. So that's what we've been doing here and with different organizations and various favelas in Rio, and also doing it all over the world. We have a couple of larger projects that we're working on now. That's understanding the power of like music, sport, and arts in our world. I mean, you look at like World War II stopped because they wanted to have the World Cup, you know. So I mean, you look at how much power like these things have. So we created a project called Hip Hop Loves Compilations Volume 1, Hip Hop for Haiti. We've done work in Haiti. We're still doing work in Haiti. And we have artists from over 40 countries that have participated in recording songs that are going to be based off of, the proceeds will go to continued sustainable workshops for hip hop loves, and in particular in Haiti. And also to help rebuild a small village called Baladez in the southwest peninsula of Haiti that between the earthquake and the hurricane is still not recovered at all from it. So that's that. We're actually doing a second one. We're almost done with that. We're starting a second one now. That's going to actually be for Brazil, That'll be released November 2021 when we do our Global Empowerment and Cultural Summit in Rio. But most importantly, that's more relevant now that we have a project called Stop Shooting, in which we do workshops with kids, and we're putting together an actual music project that is having the hip hop community, the global hip hop community, take a stance on the gun violence and brutality that's happening all over the world. So we already have, it's about 20 songs, about artists from 20 different countries. We already have 3 videos done you can check out. Yusuf Salam, for some people may know from the Central Park 5, Central Park Exonerated, is on our advisory board. He actually did a rhyme with some of the kids in Harlem. So we have a song within that we did a video for. We've done one in Moscow, we've done one in Atlanta. We're doing one here. 2 artists from Rio just finished up doing some verses last night. We have a song from Sao Paulo. So, we feel it's important. The voices need to be heard as far as, about these topics, and using it in a creative and productive way, we feel is the important way to do it. So that's pretty much what we've been doing. We're doing it, and again, if there are people, like even the listeners, like if people want to get involved and you have something you want to do in a particular country, like we're always open to. The one thing we think is important is partnerships, collaborations. Is very important to collaborate in this world. Theresa, mentioned it before, this is about Rio, I just feel my opinion too, people from other countries need to help with this situation here. It's not just something that's going to be resolved just in Brazil. Just when you look at economic, it's kind of interesting when you get to generational wealth in certain countries, like Brazil, Black community does not have that generational wealth. They're the generation now that's coming up, they're going to get to that first generation of that, but that's still taking a while, and it's the same thing that happened with African Americans, and people saying, people saying before, oh, people coming from some, living in Minneapolis, sending stuff to Somalia, there was no one sending money to people, African Americans, to people in America. That wealth got built. It also got destroyed at one point in Tulsa by white supremacists, and it had to get rebuilt again. So this is something that's important. Even in Brazil, it's going to need the help of the global community to help with this. And and it's sad because half the country is Black. So it's it's important, and to actually add, it's very real. We've been doing initiatives to help get food kits and hygiene products to different various favelas, and it's very real. Police operations coming in at 6 a.m. and the people who want to even deliver food to people who need food in these favelas can't even do it because the police are coming in, shooting people, killing people, barging into people's house, without warning, things of that nature. And it's rough. I'm not trying to bring it down dimmer, but these are why we're doing these solutions, to help make things better at the end of the day. And it's going to need the help of, point being, it's going to need the help of everybody.
I want to reflect what I think you said earlier. It wasn't just about race. And when I was in Zimbabwe in 2002, 2003, it was a time when there was the most political violence in history. And this was Mugabe and his cronies. And there were people in the townships that were getting their doors busted in at 3 a.m. And if they didn't have the right party card, that they were with the ZANU-PF, which is Mugabe's political party, they would get beaten up in their homes, right? And so, that's what's at stake. And I think that in the US and, the younger generations, even me, I'm an 80s kid, we've become very comfortable, and we don't think about what is, the privilege that we have and the rights that we have that need to be protected. So yeah, it's about power. It's about, can we come together? Can we be more strategic? And I think those of us that are in social movements, how can we use the power of technology, of art, to unify and to say, what do we really want to get after, right? And what are we really willing to do to commit? And are we going to wait for the UN to fix it? Are we going to wait for governments to fix it? Or are we going to...
Exactly.
right? So I want to just, yeah, last, oh, go ahead, and I just want to go around and we'll kind of
Okay,
have some
can I
last
go?
words. Yeah, Renee, are you complete?
I just want to say one quick thing about the technology and the education thing. I think it's very important. Like, yeah, you can get stuff for free, but also people have to have the resources to be able to get online. Like, for example, here in like the favelas in
Access.
Rio, some of these kids don't have phones. They don't have laptops. So to go online to be able to look at stuff, and after yes, and to what Theresa said, it's very true. Like, people are very innovative when it comes to using internet and using stuff like the different platforms, but you also have to have the access to do it, and you also have to have stability within internet, like in your areas, to even be able to do these things. So that's an important thing as far as resources are concerned.
So it's a fourth industrial revolution kind of opportunity that we can get behind. Right on. Thank you. And in Africa too. Yeah. Thank you.
Exactly, Latin American too.
And everywhere, right?
Yeah.
All right, over to you.
Even in Japan, there is children who doesn't have internet access, or they don't have an iPhone or iPad. It's reality.
Japan is far behind what people would think. It's like, oh, it's so light years ahead because it used to be, right?
And
then it kind
they don't have. It's true. What I want to talk is about the multicultural society. As you know, I'm from Bolivia, and Bolivia is a multicultural society, but native people and mixed people. And when I came to Japan, I was shocked because really Japan is homogeneous society. So I tried to integrate in the society, but it was kind of difficult because to make friends in Japan takes time. It's not like in Bolivia. If you meet somebody in the taxi or in the bus, immediately you get connection, and you can have a good friend for all your life. In Japan, you have to go step by step. You cannot really outreach the people without going through this invisible law that the society put. And of course, it cost me a lot of time to understand many cultural aspects in Japan. And in the beginning, I saw everything different from Bolivian culture and Japanese culture. But once I start knowing a language, I start knowing many aspects of Japanese culture, I could see a lot of similarities. For example, in music, in the instrument of music, and the mentality, because as mentioned before, Bolivia has 60% approximately of native population, and they have a lot of things that can be common with Japanese culture. The face, the structure of the body, the mentality, the way of talking. Uh, so, and the religion and philosophy. Any native population probably was kind of Shintoist, and Japanese is Shintoist. So gradually, I start feeling very comfortable with the cultural aspects in Japan. And I was thinking, what I have in common with America, where I live? Practically nothing. And America probably is the Anglo-Saxon culture, right? But out of these cultural aspects, I start thinking about many other things, like how the Japan treat to the foreigners. So there is certain structures in Japan that is very difficult to break. Or, for example, the labor system starts as soon as you finish the university. and you have to work in the company you're getting for all your life, right? And the homogeneity is not only in ways of looking, in ways of tasting, but it's also in ways of mentality of education. I think the former, do you know, Japan was a poor country who became the second economy in the world 30 years ago. It was really unbelievable the short time it took. And Japan has two big disasters. One was the big earthquake. Tokyo was completely devastated. And the other one was the Second World War. It was also devastated. And in 70 years, you see this country, and it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And Japan has no natural resources. So how Japan became the second economy and now has its third position. I don't know what it will happen after Corona, but still keeping the third position in the world economy. The important key was the education, religion, and philosophy. Japan is a Buddhist and Shintoist country, but they are not really religious. They are most customary, and they respect what they believe. And how they respect. In the education system, the main things they teach is language and mathematics. But other important thing they teach is discipline, organization, hygienic, and obedience to the teacher. And those aspects go through all their life, and they don't have an education that they can really express by themselves, or they can give their own opinion. They cannot think by themselves. They always has to obey what the teachers think, and that is the truth. Nowadays, that education system is trying to change because it's not sustainable anymore. It worked before to become the second economy, but now the challenges are different and governments are trying to change that, right? So my contribution as politician is to try to integrate to the foreigners in this system and try also to change the education, right? Because we need people who can think. We need people who can make decisions. We need people who can contribute in the society. And Japan needs that kind of people. In the other hand, Bolivian people are blessed with natural resource. We have everything about talking about minerals, for example. We were the first exports of silver. We have gold. Now we have lithium in the Uyuni Lake. The lithium you use in any devices, electronic devices. But we are developing country. We cannot industrialize these natural resources. So we cannot grow as a rich country. We cannot go to other step. But in the other hand, people are very creative, very innovative. They can really think. They can do many things. Government, obviously the government is kind of mess, like in any Latin American country, but people are very friendly, I guess, in Latin America. Even though the economical problems, even though the social problems, we can still find in people who enjoy life, who enjoy family time, who enjoy who enjoy with friends, who enjoy small things in life, who enjoy nature, who enjoy music, who create their own. Latin American people really love dancing and singing.
Yeah, like I really agree with you. So when I was
And
traveling,
this
yeah,
is kind of different with
yeah,
Japanese culture. Japanese people
I love,
have
I
everything
really, yeah,
perfect to enjoy.
I love really Latin culture.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Noemi. Yuki, Theresa is gonna have to bow out. They're late. It's late at night over in Rio. So I just want to say, if you want to say goodbye or last word as you're signing out, just from what you've heard there, and yeah, we'll catch you in future conversations.
Yeah, I don't know even how coherent I am at 11:30 p.m. This is a great experiment. No, I had some like caffeinated tea, so hopefully. But just I just wanted to say that I don't know exactly what to add, except to say that we've been working with now with the whole COVID situation in favelas. I posted there a little link. I don't know if it's helpful to anyone, but we've been supporting local organizers on the ground who are responding. I mentioned some of that earlier. So we've been having daily meetings in the evenings with local favela-based leaders from, I think in the last couple of months, we've had 50 different communities. So every single night we have meetings with different leaders on different issues for a couple of months now. And there's a lot going on. But one thing that I think would be of interest to folks is we're developing a crowdsourced COVID dashboard. So favela leaders will be reporting on confirmed cases and deaths in their own favelas to a public dashboard, is so that we can develop an alternative to the public data sources that are so problematic. So that's one thing we're working on. Rio on Watch, which you mentioned, Melanie, is our news site. It just turned 10. If you go there, you can click on a timeline. It shows 10 years of work. It's very cool to see it displayed that way. It's a very unique news platform that I think more cities in the world could do something like it. Basically what we created, it was before the Olympics, and the dominant narrative was favelas are this horrible thing, we should get rid of them, right? And they're violent, so we should send in the police. And so the government was directing policies towards these communities that were either evicting them or were coming down heavy-handed with policing. And we realized that, until people understood what these communities actually are, or understand, because it's a long process, then you're going to have people outside supporting these sorts of policies. So anyway, Rio on Watch was created at the time as Rio Olympics Neighborhood Watch, as a news site where favela perspectives would be shared by local residents and people who are there supporting them, allies and solidarity reporters, international observers, and others. And these would get shared in English and Portuguese, and it would influence perspectives globally, which then influenced the mayor. And there are quite a few cases where this happened. Later, after the Olympics, it became much more of a local resource. So now the vast majority of readers are in Rio, except this month, we just had 194 countries reading Rio on Watch in May. So we had our all-time high in readership. I think it was like 70 to 80,000. So it's a favela news source that's being read by people around the world for a decade. And it's really interesting because we're taking hyper-local information and making it globally accessible. And I really don't know who else does that. And I think more places should do that, because in the process of doing that, you're destigmatizing, you're opening up these opportunities for understanding, and also, so we're part of a really robust local media ecosystem. So you have this you know, these grassroots news producers and communicators in the favelas on the ground. And then you have organizations like us and others. We do the cross-cultural because we have bilingual, but there are other groups that do this sort of intermediate working with these local groups, but also helping build bridges to other groups and media as well. So we, for example, I talk a lot to global media and you know, also every just about major outlet that's covered Rio, we've worked with. So we can make these connections. So it's a way of sort of getting the narrative to shift by creating an environment where you have these local grassroots folks that are trusted by and known by NGOs and groups like us that support them, that then can make these connections cross-culturally in other languages and so on. Anyway, it's really great right now during the pandemic. It's been critical because nobody can visit the favelas, including reporters. And so how do you think the news is getting out? It's through these local grassroots communicators, journalists. So they live there, and now they've built relationships with all these major media outlets and others. And so when the news is getting out, it's actually it's these local groups that are on the ground. So it's really an interesting model of media production and relationship building, and seeing it more as an ecosystem rather than as a hierarchy or a competitive kind of climate. So anyway, I don't know if, I know you had asked about media, so I thought I would talk a little bit about that model. But yeah, it would be great to stay in touch with anyone who wants to reach out later. And yeah,
Great.
It's been really—
Farouk is asking for everybody's contact. So Theresa, I think you shared your email. I think that René did. And yeah, definitely everyone's available on LinkedIn. So we'll get everybody's public profiles for contact. And I couldn't agree more, Theresa. It's amazing. Congratulations on Rio Unwatched turning 10. And it's incredible that, you know, that birthed out of from 5 and 6 years before the Rio Olympics. You know, that's when the stuff was hitting the ground, and your foresight and, you know, kind of creating a visibility of those local voices is something that definitely needs to go global. So hopefully we can span more of those. And Yuki, I know we're ending, so thank you. Do you want to say goodbye or any last words?
Thank you very much. I don't want to finish this conference just conference. You know, we have to connect to the next action. Absolutely. So we have to stay connected, and let's move forward.
Well, the good news, I'll say this to all of you. Our next webinar is actually on June 23rd. Sonia, who's on our Learning for Life team, she's our learning specialist with the Global Summit. We're creating a Catalyst Action training this fall, so it's going to continue after Impact Week. The Global Summit it's going year round, and most likely Impact Week will be annual rather than every other year. But yeah, to your point, Noemi, innovation and education in Japan is definitely something, you know, to bring that creativity in. That's one of the things we're going to be discussing too. So anyway, the conversation continues. Voices 365 is a web-based local citizen media. So we're definitely hoping to embrace some of those qualities and principles that you've been leading on, Theresa. So thanks for your inspiration, and thanks everybody. I know I don't want this conversation to end, but we'll be doing more. This Thriving Cities will be an ongoing, repeated theme. So as our impact team continues to grow. So thanks everybody. And anyone who's listening, the chat's here, definitely all of these amazing panelists and guests and partners will be accessible and connected on our chat on the Facebook event. So thank you, and signing out. Mille arigatos, and sayonara.
Sayonara.
Obrigada.
Obrigada.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Ciao.
We contact each other.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll do one email
And
with
it was
everybody.
lovely
Actually,
to meet you.
Necesitamos volar juntos.
Sí.
Cierto. Vamos a Koenji para un sake, okay? René, Theresa. Good night.
Gracias, Teresa.
Buenas
Gracias,
noches.
José.
Ciao.
Chao, chao. Ciao, ciao.
Talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thank you,
Ciao,
Renee.
ciao.
Thanks, Noemi.
Bye-bye.